She hid her twins. From the billionaire CEO until they met by accident. I have 2 children you've never met. These 7 words shattered Daniel Blackwood's world as he stood frozen, staring at the woman he'd walked away from 16 years ago. The tech billionaire who commanded boardrooms with unwavering confidence now trembled before Eliza Morgan and the truth she had finally revealed. Twins, she continued, her amber eyes never leaving his face. A boy and a girl. They're 15 years old, Daniel. They have your eyes, your mind, your smile. Daniel gripped the terrace railing to steady himself, the prestigious alumni award he'd just received now forgotten in his hand. 15 years, he whispered, the magnitude of what he'd lost washing over him like a tidal wave. I have children I've never met. Children who've never called me dad. You made your choice, Eliza said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Your career, your ambitions, your billions. You chose all of that over us. If I had known, Daniel began, his voice breaking. Would it have made a difference? Eliza challenged. 1 child wasn't worth staying for. Would 2 have changed your mind? Have you ever wondered what price is too high for success? What would you do if you discovered that in pursuing your dreams, you'd unknowingly sacrifice something irreplaceable? Today's story will take you on an emotional journey of choices, consequences, and second chances that might just change how you think about what truly matters in life. If you've ever had to choose between ambition and love, this story will touch your heart. Like and subscribe to Mr. Sterling's Secrets of Love for more powerful stories about second chances. Thousands of viewers just like you are finding healing through these stories every day. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Don't miss the life-changing messages that our community is already benefiting from. The subscribe button is right there. Unless you think some things are better left in the past. 16 years earlier, Daniel Blackwood arrived at Westridge Academy with nothing but a scholarship, second-hand clothes, and a desperate determination to escape the poverty that had defined his childhood. The prestigious boarding school in Connecticut represented everything he'd never had. Opportunity, resources, a future beyond the cramped apartment where his mother worked double shifts to keep the lights on. On his first day, he sat alone in the dining hall, acutely aware of the designer clothes and casual wealth surrounding him. He didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. Is this seat taken? Daniel looked up to find a girl with amber eyes and a warm smile standing beside him. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and unlike most of the other students, she wasn't dripping with expensive accessories. No, he managed, surprised anyone would choose to sit with the scholarship kid. I'm Eliza Morgan, she said, setting down her tray. You're in my advanced physics class, right? The one who corrected Professor Winters about quantum entanglement? Daniel felt his face warm. I shouldn't have done that. Are you kidding? It was brilliant. His face turned the most interesting shade of purple. She laughed. And something in Daniel's chest loosened at the sound. I've never seen anyone challenge him before. That lunch became the first of many. Daniel soon learned that Eliza was Westridge royalty. Her family had attended for generations. Her father was on the board of trustees, and her life had been mapped out since birth. Yet she carried her privilege lightly, with a kindness and authenticity that drew Daniel to her like a moth to flame. Their friendship blossomed over late-night study sessions and weekend walks through the campus grounds. Daniel found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone. His dreams of becoming a doctor, of developing treatments that could save lives, of proving that a kid from the wrong side of the tracks could make a difference in the world. You will, Eliza told him with such certainty that he almost believed it himself. You're the smartest person I've ever met, Daniel, and the most determined. By winter, their friendship had deepened into something more. Their first kiss happened in the library stacks. Surrounded by medical textbooks, Daniel was studying beyond the curriculum. Eliza had found him there, brought him coffee, and somehow their discussion about cellular regeneration had turned into Daniel cupping her face in his hands, wondering how someone like her could possibly want someone like him. You don't see yourself clearly, she whispered against his lips. But I do. Spring brought college acceptances, Columbia for Eliza, as her family had planned, and a partial scholarship to Boston University for Daniel. Not his dream school, but the best he could afford even with financial aid. "We'll make it work," Eliza promised as they lay on a blanket beneath the stars, her head on his chest. "Boston and New York aren't that far apart. We can visit on weekends." Daniel pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. "I'll work extra shifts if I have to. Nothing's going to keep us apart." He meant it with every fiber of his being. In Eliza, he'd found not just love but belief. Someone who saw past his circumstances to the person he could become. For the first time in his life, Daniel dared to imagine a future that included not just professional success but personal happiness. Then came the letter that would change everything. Dr. Harrison Wells, a renowned researcher at Stanford Medical School, had visited Westridge to give a guest lecture. Daniel had impressed him with his questions and insights, enough that the professor had looked into his academic record. The letter offered what Daniel had never dared to dream of: a full scholarship to Stanford's accelerated medical program, followed by a guaranteed research position in Wells' cutting-edge laboratory. It was everything Daniel had ever wanted: a direct path to becoming the doctor and researcher he aspired to be, to developing treatments that could help thousands. The kind of opportunity that someone with his background simply didn't get. But there was a condition. "The program begins in 2 weeks," Dr. Wells explained when Daniel called to accept. "You'll need to be in California immediately for summer orientation. And I should warn you, this is an intensive program. No distractions, no divided attention. Students with personal attachments rarely succeed." The implication was clear. Choose the scholarship or choose Eliza. Not both. Daniel spent a sleepless night weighing his options. He could decline the offer, attend Boston University as planned, be close to Eliza. They would struggle financially, he would take longer to complete his education, and the prestigious research position would go to someone else. But they would be together. Or he could accept, knowing it meant leaving Eliza behind. The accelerated program would consume his life for years. Long-distance relationships rarely survived such separations. It would be kinder, cleaner, to make a clean break now rather than subject her to years of neglect before the inevitable end. He told himself he was being rational, that Eliza deserved someone who could be present, who could give her the life she was accustomed to. That one day, when he'd achieved his goals, perhaps they could find each other again. What he couldn't admit, even to himself, was that he was terrified of failing, of not being good enough, of Eliza eventually realizing she'd tied herself to someone who couldn't match what she'd been born into. So Daniel Blackwood, the boy who had fallen in love with a girl far above his station, made the decision that would haunt him for the next 16 years. He packed his few belongings, withdrew from Boston University, and left Westridge without saying goodbye. He transferred enough money to cover his share of the sailing trip they'd planned for after graduation, then cut all contact, changed his phone number, deleted his email account, severed every tie. He told himself it was a clean break. He told himself it was for the best. He never knew that 2 weeks after he disappeared, Eliza Morgan would stare at a positive pregnancy test in disbelief, her world collapsing around her. While Daniel immersed himself in Stanford's accelerated program, pushing himself to the limits of endurance to justify the choice he'd made, Eliza faced her own challenges. She deferred her Columbia acceptance for a year, weathered her parents' initial disappointment, and prepared to become a mother at 18. "Twins," the doctor had told her during her first ultrasound. "Congratulations." Eliza had laughed through her tears. Of course it would be twins. Nothing about this journey would be simple. Her parents, after the initial shock, rallied around her. They converted the guest room into a nursery, hired the best obstetrician in Boston, and assured Eliza that her future wasn't over, just taking a different path than planned. "What about the father?" her mother had asked gently. "He's gone," Eliza replied, her hand resting on her growing belly. "He made his choice, and it wasn't us." When Alexander and Olivia Morgan were born on a snowy January morning, Eliza gazed into their tiny faces and made a promise. "You will never doubt that you are loved. Never." As the years passed, Daniel Blackwood's name became synonymous with innovation in the medical field. He completed Stanford's program in record time, earned his MD/PhD with honors, and secured patents for groundbreaking treatments in regenerative medicine. By 30, he had founded Blackwood Medical Technologies, attracting investors with his vision of revolutionizing treatment for previously incurable conditions. Success followed success. The company went public, making Daniel a millionaire overnight. Breakthrough treatments earned FDA approval, expanding into international markets. Profiles in medical journals led to features in business magazines. The scholarship boy from the wrong side of the tracks transformed into the brilliant, driven CEO whose company was valued in the billions. Yet in his penthouse overlooking Seattle, Daniel often stood at the window late at night, a glass of expensive scotch in hand, feeling hollowed out by success. He had everything he'd ever thought he wanted: recognition, wealth, the knowledge that his work was changing lives. But something vital was missing. Sometimes, in quiet moments, he allowed himself to search for Eliza online. He found her professional profile, Morgan Sustainable Design, an architectural firm specializing in environmentally conscious buildings. Her work was impressive, innovative, exactly what he would have expected from the brilliant girl he'd loved. But her personal life remained private, her social media minimal and professionally focused. He told himself it was better this way, that she had moved on, built a life without him, just as he had built his empire without her. That reopening old wounds would serve no purpose, so Daniel Blackwood continued his relentless pursuit of the next medical breakthrough, filling his emptiness with work and more work, telling himself that the void inside him was simply the price of ambition. Meanwhile, in a warm, light-filled home in Boston, Eliza Morgan raised her twins with the same quiet determination that had gotten her through pregnancy at 18 and architecture school with toddlers underfoot. Alexander and Olivia grew into remarkable teenagers, each brilliant in their own way. Alexander inherited his father's analytical mind and passion for science, devouring textbooks beyond his grade level and conducting experiments in the basement lab Eliza had built for his 13th birthday. Olivia channeled her intelligence into music and writing, her compositions and poetry revealing a depth of emotion and insight that sometimes took Eliza's breath away. They had her amber eyes and stubborn chin, but everything else, from their tall, lean builds to the way they tilted their heads when considering a problem, was pure Daniel. As they grew older, the resemblance became more pronounced, a daily reminder of the man who had walked away. The twins knew only that their father had been someone Eliza loved in college who wasn't ready for fatherhood. A partial truth that seemed kinder than the whole story. But as they approached 16, their questions became more frequent, more pointed. "Mom, look at this," Olivia said one evening, holding up a science magazine. "This guy who founded Blackwood Medical Technologies. He looks like Alex when he concentrates." Eliza's heart stuttered as she glanced at the cover. Daniel stared back at her, older but unmistakable, his gray eyes intense as he explained some breakthrough to the interviewer. "Huh," she managed, keeping her voice casual. "I suppose there's a resemblance." Alexander peered over his sister's shoulder. "Blackwood's work in neural regeneration is revolutionary. Did you know they're starting clinical trials for spinal cord injuries? The preliminary results show a 60% improvement in function." "Are you sure you didn't date a secret genius, Mom?" Olivia teased, studying the magazine photo more closely. If only they knew how close to the truth they were. "Our subscribers tell me these stories have saved relationships and changed their perspective on life. Can you really afford to miss the next one? Hit subscribe now or tell us in the comments why you're choosing to walk away from these powerful lessons." The email from Westridge Academy arrived on a Tuesday morning. Eliza was reviewing plans for a sustainable community center in Singapore when the notification appeared on her phone. The subject line was simple: Westridge Academy Alumni Gala, Special Recognition. But it was the sender's name that made her heart stutter in her chest. Dr. James Harrington, headmaster. With a deep breath, she opened the email. The gala would honor distinguished alumni who had made significant contributions to society. Dr. Daniel Blackwood, pioneering researcher and founder of Blackwood Medical Technologies, would be receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award for his groundbreaking work in regenerative medicine. 16 years of silence, and now she would see him again in a ballroom filled with their former classmates. Eliza closed the email and tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept returning to the invitation, After 16 years, she would stand face to face with Daniel Blackwood again. The boy who had promised her forever, then vanished. The father who had never known his children existed. What would she say to him? What could possibly bridge the chasm of 16 years and twin-shaped secrets? For weeks, she debated whether to attend, changing her mind daily. It was the twins who finally decided her. "You should go, Mom," Alexander said, looking up from his physics homework with those serious gray eyes, so like his father's. "You always tell us to face challenges head-on." "Besides," Olivia added with her characteristic directness, "maybe you'll run into our mystery dad and can finally get some closure." If only they knew. 3,000 miles away in Seattle, Daniel Blackwood stared out the window of his penthouse office. The city spread before him like a constellation of earthbound stars. The email from Westridge had arrived 3 days ago, and he'd been unable to think of anything else since. "Dr. Blackwood?" His executive assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The board members are assembled in the conference room." "I'll be right there," he replied, straightening his tie and gathering the presentation materials for what should have been the most important meeting of his quarter. Blackwood Medical Technologies was on the verge of receiving FDA approval for their revolutionary tissue regeneration therapy. Years of research, hundreds of millions in investment, and countless sleepless nights were about to pay off. This was the culmination of everything he'd worked for since leaving Westridge, since leaving Eliza all those years ago. Yet all he could think about was her name on the RSVP list for the alumni gala. Eliza Morgan. The girl with amber eyes who had seen through his carefully constructed defenses. The only person who had ever truly known him, his fears, his dreams, his desperate need to escape the poverty that had defined his childhood. The woman he had loved with an intensity that still haunted him. The woman he had abandoned to protect his future. Their future, he'd told himself at the time. What a fool he had been. As the day of the gala approached, both Eliza and Daniel found themselves increasingly anxious. Eliza carefully selected an emerald gown that complemented her eyes, while Daniel ensured his private jet was ready to fly him to Connecticut. Both told themselves they were being ridiculous, that 16 years was a lifetime, that whatever they had once meant to each other was long buried under the weight of time and separate lives. Both were wrong. The Westridge Academy campus hadn't changed much in 16 years. The same ivy-covered brick buildings, the same manicured lawns, the same sense of privilege and possibility that had once felt so foreign to Daniel and so familiar to Eliza. As her car pulled up to the main building, Eliza smoothed her emerald gown and took a steadying breath. The twins were staying with her parents for the weekend, blissfully unaware that their mother was about to confront the man who had unknowingly helped create them. As she entered the grand ballroom, a wave of memories washed over her. The winter formal where she and Daniel had first danced together. The charity auction where he'd bid his entire semester's savings on a weekend sailing trip for two, just to give her the experience she'd casually mentioned wanting. The countless moments, big and small, that had knit their hearts together before he'd severed the connection without warning. "Eliza Morgan, is that really you?" She turned to see Catherine Winters, her former roommate, approaching with a glass of champagne in hand. Catherine had barely changed, still blonde, still effortlessly elegant, still radiating the confidence that came from old money and older family names. "Catherine, how wonderful to see you," Eliza said, accepting her former roommate's air kiss. "You look amazing. As do you. I've been following your work. That sustainable community center in Rwanda was brilliant. You've made quite a name for yourself." "Thank you. It's been a fulfilling journey." Catherine lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Speaking of journeys, have you seen Daniel Blackwood yet? Word is he flew in on his private jet this morning. Can you believe our scholarship boy owns a biotech empire now?" Eliza's heart stuttered. "No, I haven't seen him." "Well, prepare yourself. He's even more gorgeous than he was at 18, if that's possible. Still has that intensity that made half the girls at Westridge swoon." Catherine glanced over Eliza's shoulder, her eyes widening slightly. And speaking of the devil, Eliza didn't need to turn around to know he was there. She could feel his presence like a change in atmospheric pressure, a disturbance in the air that had always been uniquely Daniel. Slowly, She turned. And there he was. 16 years had transformed the boy she'd loved into a man she barely recognized. Gone was the slightly too long hair and the second-hand blazer that never quite fit his broad shoulders. This Daniel wore his success like a second skin. Tailored tuxedo, confident stance, the subtle aura of power that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he was worth. But his eyes, those storm gray eyes that had once looked at her with such love, they were the same. And right now, they were fixed on her with an expression of shock, recognition, and something else she couldn't quite name. For a moment, the crowded ballroom seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them suspended in time. Then Daniel was moving toward her, navigating through clusters of alumni with single-minded determination. "Eliza," he said, her name on his lips still sounding like a prayer after all these years. "Daniel," she replied, proud of how steady her voice remained despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. Up close, she could see the subtle signs of the years that had passed. Faint lines at the corners of his eyes, a touch of silver at his temples. He had aged well, time only enhancing the strong features that had once made her heart race. They still did, she realized with dismay. "You look," he began, then seemed to lose his words. "I didn't know if you'd come." "I almost didn't." An awkward silence fell between them. 16 years of unspoken words creating a barrier neither seemed able to breach. "Congratulations on your award," Eliza finally said, falling back on politeness like a shield. "Your work in regenerative medicine is impressive. Thank you." Daniel's eyes never left her face, as if he were memorizing her features all over again. "And you, I've followed your career, the sustainable designs, the innovation in eco-friendly materials. You've accomplished everything you dreamed of." Not everything, she thought. But she merely nodded, unwilling to give him even a glimpse of the life he'd missed, the children he didn't know existed. "Eliza, Daniel began, but was interrupted by the headmaster's voice over the microphone, announcing that dinner would be served shortly and asking everyone to find their assigned tables. "I should find my seat," Eliza said, grateful for the reprieve. "We need to talk," Daniel said, an edge of urgency in his voice. "Please, after the ceremony." She should say no. She should maintain the distance that 16 years had created. She should protect herself, and her children, from the man who had walked away without a backward glance. But the words that came out of her mouth were, "The terrace, 9 o'clock." Daniel nodded, relief washing over his features. "I'll be there." As she walked away, Eliza wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life since falling in love with Daniel Blackwood in the first place. The award ceremony proceeded like a dream, or perhaps a nightmare, as Eliza watched Daniel accept his Lifetime Achievement Award with grace and humility. His speech was eloquent, touching on the transformative power of education and the importance of perseverance in the face of obstacles. He thanked his mentors, his team at Blackwood Medical Technologies, and the Westridge faculty who had believed in a scholarship student from the wrong side of the tracks. Not once did he mention her, though his eyes found hers in the audience more than once. At precisely 9 o'clock, Eliza slipped away from the ballroom and made her way to the terrace where she and Daniel had spent countless evenings during their Westridge days, talking about everything and nothing until curfew forced them apart. The night air was cool against her bare shoulders, the spring stars brilliant overhead. She leaned against the stone balustrade, remembering another night 16 years ago when they had stood in this very spot, making promises neither of them had kept. "You always loved the stars," Daniel's voice came from behind her, soft and achingly familiar. Eliza didn't turn. "They're constant, reliable, unlike some things." She heard him sigh, then felt him move to stand beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I deserve that," he said quietly. "I deserve much worse, actually." "Why did you want to meet, Daniel? To reminisce about old times? To assuage your guilt? What could we possibly have to say to each other after 16 years of silence?" When he didn't immediately respond, she finally turned to look at him. The confident man from the ballroom was gone, replaced by someone who looked almost as lost as the scholarship boy she'd once loved. "I wanted to explain," he said finally. "Not to excuse what I did. There is no excuse. But to tell you the truth, you deserve at least that much. 16 years too late. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. But I'm asking you to listen anyway, please. The please undid her. Daniel Blackwood, with all his pride and brilliance, had rarely begged for anything. Fine, she said. Explain. And so he did. He told her about Dr. Wells's ultimatum, the scholarship that would set him on the path to medical innovation, but only if he cut ties with her completely. He described the impossible choice he'd faced, his dreams or their love. He admitted his cowardice in leaving without saying goodbye, convinced that seeing her one more time would shatter his resolve. I told myself it was for the best, he said, his voice rough with emotion. That someday, when I'd accomplished everything I set out to do, I would find you again and make things right. But each year that passed made it harder to reach out. What could I possibly say that would justify what I'd done? Nothing, Eliza said softly. There's nothing you could say. Daniel nodded, accepting her judgment. I know. And I've lived with that knowledge every day for 16 years. He turned to face her fully. I won't ask for your forgiveness, Eliza. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted my choice. Success, money, recognition. None of it has filled the void you left. The raw honesty in his voice threatened to crack the protective shell she'd built around her heart. But she couldn't afford to be vulnerable. Not when so much was at stake. Why tell me this now? She asked. What do you expect to happen, Daniel? That I'll fall into your arms and we'll pick up where we left off? That's not how life works. I don't expect anything, he said. I just couldn't bear to see you tonight and not tell you the truth. You deserved better than what I did to you, Eliza. You deserved everything. A lump formed in her throat. Yes, I did. They stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future hanging between them. Finally, Daniel spoke again. I understand if you never want to see me again after tonight, but I need you to know that walking away from you was the biggest mistake of my life. I've achieved everything I thought I wanted, but none of it matters without someone to share it with. Without you. The sincerity in his voice made something inside Eliza tremble. For a moment, she was tempted to tell him everything. About the twins, about the life they could have shared, about the family they might have been. But 16 years of raising children alone had taught her caution. It's not that simple, Daniel, she said finally. Life went on after you left. I went on. I know, he said quietly. And I'm glad. You deserve happiness, Eliza. More than anyone I've ever known. A burst of laughter from the ballroom interrupted the moment, reminding them both that they were surrounded by their past, classmates, teachers, memories both sweet and painful. I should go, Eliza said, suddenly needing space to think. It's getting late. Daniel nodded, disappointment evident in his eyes but respecting her decision. Of course, thank you for listening. As she turned to leave, he spoke again. Eliza, I'm staying in Connecticut for a few days. If you wanted to talk more, I'd be here. She paused, not turning back. Goodbye, Daniel. Walking away from him was both the hardest and easiest thing she'd ever done. Hard because, despite everything, some part of her still responded to him, still remembered the boy who had loved her with such intensity. Easy because she had her children to think about, children who deserved better than a father who had chosen ambition over love. What she didn't expect was the text message that arrived as she was checking into her hotel room. I meant what I said, every word. D, followed by another. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to know the woman you've become. Eliza stared at her phone, torn between deleting the messages and responding. In the end, she did neither, setting the phone aside and trying to sleep. But rest eluded her as memories and possibilities chased each other through her mind. The next morning, she woke to another message. Having breakfast at Rosemary Cafe on Main Street. 9 a.m., no pressure, just coffee if you want it. Rosemary Cafe, their old haunt where they'd spent countless Saturday mornings studying together. Daniel nursing a single cup of coffee for hours because it was all he could afford, Eliza pretending not to notice when she ordered enough food for both of them. She shouldn't go. She had a flight back to Boston at noon. The twins would be waiting for her stories about the gala. She had a life to return to, a life that had no place for Daniel Blackwood. And yet at 9:15, she found herself pushing open the door to Rosemary Cafe, spotting Daniel immediately in a corner booth, a cup of coffee cooling in front of him as he stared out the window. He looked up as she approached, surprise and hope flashing across his face. "You came." "I'm not staying long," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "My flight leaves at noon." "Back to Boston?" he asked, signaling the waitress for another coffee. "Yes. I have responsibilities there." Daniel nodded, studying her face. "Your architecture firm is based there, right? Morgan Sustainable Design? You've done your research. I told you, I've followed your career. Your work on the Children's Hospital in Portland was revolutionary. Healing spaces that actually promote recovery through design." Despite herself, Eliza felt a flush of pleasure at his knowledge of her work. "That project was special to me. Because of the children?" The question was innocent, but it hit too close to home. Eliza tensed, and Daniel noticed immediately. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to pry." "It's fine." She took a sip of the coffee the waitress had placed in front of her. "Yes, I've always had a soft spot for projects that impact children." Daniel hesitated, then asked softly, "Do you have any?" "Children. I mean," the question she'd been dreading. The moment of truth, or continued deception. Eliza looked into the gray eyes that had passed to her son and daughter, and made a decision. "Yes," she said simply. "Twins, a boy and a girl. They're 15. Daniel's expression shifted from polite interest to shock as the math registered. 15, he repeated, his voice barely audible. "That would mean they were conceived just before graduation. Just before you disappeared." The color drained from Daniel's face. Are they mine?" "Yes." The single word hung between them, changing everything. Daniel gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "I have children," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "I have a son and a daughter." "Their names are Alexander and Olivia," Eliza said, finding a strange relief in finally speaking the truth. "Alexander is studying quantum physics in his spare time and wants to attend MIT. Olivia plays 3 instruments and writes poetry that makes me cry. They're brilliant, kind, and the best parts of my life." Daniel listened with an expression of wonder and devastation. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you?" Eliza's voice sharpened. "How exactly was I supposed to do that, Daniel? You disappeared without a word. No phone calls, no emails, nothing. By the time I realized I was pregnant, you were gone." "You could have found me," he insisted. "My name, my company, I wasn't hiding." "You made your choice," Eliza said firmly. "You chose your career over us. I was respecting that choice." Daniel ran a hand over his face, struggling to process the revelation. 15 years, he murmured. "I've missed 15 years of their lives." "Yes." "Do they know about me?" Eliza hesitated. "They know their father was someone I loved in school who wasn't ready for fatherhood. They know he's successful in the medical field. They don't know it's you specifically." "Have they asked?" "Of course they've asked. They're curious, intelligent teenagers. But I've protected them from the truth because I didn't want them to feel the same rejection I felt." Daniel flinched as if she'd struck him. "I never would have rejected them, Eliza. Never. If I had known—" "But you didn't know," she interrupted, "because you chose not to be there. That was your decision, Daniel. And I've spent 15 years living with the consequences. This moment of truth could have been avoided with better communication. Don't let pride keep you from the wisdom you need. Subscribe now before you make the same mistakes as Daniel. Still hesitating? Let us know in the comments what's holding you back from joining our family of truth seekers." He was silent for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of what he'd lost. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I want to meet them." Eliza had expected this, had prepared for it during her sleepless night. That's not your decision to make. They're my children too. Biologically, yes. But in every way that matters, every school concert, every fever, every nightmare, every triumph and disappointment, they've been mine alone. She leaned forward, her voice low and intense. You don't get to walk into their lives after 15 years and disrupt everything just because you suddenly feel paternal. Daniel's jaw tightened, a flash of the old determination in his eyes. I have rights. Legal rights, perhaps, but moral rights? I don't think so. Eliza stood, gathering her purse. I need to catch my flight. Eliza, please. Daniel stood as well, desperation in his voice. Don't leave like this. We need to talk about this. About them. I've said all I need to say. Then let me say one more thing, he pleaded. I understand your anger. I understand your need to protect Alexander and Olivia. But please think about what's best for them. Don't they deserve to know where they come from? Who they come from? The question struck a chord Eliza had been trying to ignore. The twins had been asking more questions lately, especially as they approached college age and thought about their futures. Alexander, in particular, had been curious about his medical history, given his interest in science. I'll think about it, she conceded finally. But I make no promises. My priority is their well-being, not your desire for redemption. Relief washed over Daniel's face. That's all I ask. Here, he scribbled on a napkin. This is my personal number. Not my assistant, not my office, me, day or night. Eliza took the napkin reluctantly. Goodbye, Daniel. Not goodbye, he said softly. Just until next time. As she walked out of the cafe, Eliza felt as if she were carrying the weight of 16 years on her shoulders. She had kept her secret for so long, protected her children from the truth of their father's abandonment. Now that Daniel knew, everything would change. The question was whether that change would heal old wounds or create new ones. The flight back to Boston gave Eliza time to think, to plan, to worry. By the time she landed, she had decided to tell the twins the truth, or at least part of it. They deserved to know who their father was, even if they never met him. Her parents' house was quiet when she arrived, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the familiar front porch. Inside, she found her mother reading in the living room. They're in the backyard, her mother said, looking up with a knowing smile. Alexander is trying to explain some physics concept to Olivia, who is pretending not to understand just to frustrate him. Eliza laughed, the normalcy of the scene a balm to her troubled spirit. Some things never change. Her mother studied her face. The gala was difficult? You could say that. Eliza sank into the armchair across from her mother. I saw him, Mom. Daniel. Understanding dawned in her mother's eyes. Ah. And how was that? Complicated. Eliza twisted her hands in her lap. He knows about the twins now. I see. Her mother set aside her book. And how do you feel about that? Terrified, relieved, angry, all of it at once. Eliza looked out the window to where she could see her children arguing good-naturedly over a textbook. He wants to meet them. And what do you want? I want to protect them. I want them to never feel the way I felt when he left. Eliza sighed. But they're not me. And they're almost adults. Maybe they should have the right to decide for themselves. Her mother nodded slowly. They're strong, those two. Stronger than you give them credit for sometimes. Whatever you decide, they'll handle it. I know. Eliza stood, squaring her shoulders. I think it's time I told them the truth. Outside, the twins were exactly as her mother had described. Alexander gesturing animatedly at a diagram in his physics book. Olivia rolling her eyes with exaggerated confusion. Mom! Olivia spotted her first, jumping up to embrace her. You're back early. How was the gala? Did you wear the emerald dress? Did you see anyone famous? Alexander followed more sedately, but his hug was just as warm. Did you bring us those chocolate croissants from that bakery near your old school? Eliza laughed, holding them both close. Yes to the dress, no to the croissants, and the gala was eventful. Actually, I need to talk to you both about something important. The twins exchanged a glance, that silent communication they'd had since infancy. They followed her to the old wooden bench under the maple tree, their serious conversation spot since they were small. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Alexander asked, his gray eyes, so like Daniel's, searching her face with concern. "Everything's fine," Eliza assured him, "but something happened at the gala that you both should know about." She took a deep breath. "I saw your father." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The twins stared at her, identical expressions of shock on their faces. "Our father?" Olivia repeated. "The mysterious college boyfriend who wasn't ready for parenthood?" "Yes, except—" Eliza hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Except he wasn't my college boyfriend. We were together at Westridge, and his name is Daniel Blackwood." Alexander's eyes widened. "The Daniel Blackwood? The medical researcher?" "The one who was on the cover of Scientific American last month," Olivia added, her voice rising in pitch. Eliza nodded. "Yes, we were together our senior year at Westridge. He left right after graduation to accept a scholarship to Stanford. He didn't know about you until yesterday." The twins absorbed this information in stunned silence. Then, predictably, they both started talking at once. "Why didn't you tell us? Did he leave because of us? Does he want to meet us? Is that why you never talk about him?" Eliza held up her hands. "One at a time, please. This is complicated enough." Alexander, ever the analytical one, spoke first. "Why didn't he know about us?" "Because he left before I knew I was pregnant," Eliza explained. "He cut off all contact. No calls, no letters, nothing. By the time I realized I was carrying twins, he was gone." "And you never tried to find him?" Olivia asked, a hint of accusation in her voice. "I considered it," Eliza admitted. "But he had made his choice very clear. He chose his career over our relationship. I didn't want to force him into fatherhood when he'd already shown he wasn't ready for commitment." "But he's successful now," Alexander pointed out. "He could have helped financially, at least." Eliza smiled gently. "We never needed his money, Alex. Your grandparents helped when you were babies, and my career took off quickly. We've always had everything we needed." "Except a father," Olivia said quietly. The simple statement pierced Eliza's heart. "I'm sorry if you felt that absence. I tried to be enough for both roles." "You have been, Mom," Alexander said quickly, putting his arm around her shoulders. "More than enough." "But now he knows about us," Olivia pressed. "What did he say? Does he want to meet us?" Eliza nodded slowly. "Yes, he wants to meet you." He was shocked, but also seemed genuinely interested in knowing you both. "And what did you say?" Alexander's voice was carefully neutral, but Eliza could sense the tension beneath. "I said I would think about it, that it would ultimately be your decision, but that I needed time." She looked between her children, these remarkable humans she had raised alone. "This is a lot to process, for all of us. We don't need to decide anything right away." The twins exchanged another of their silent communications. "We want to meet him," they said in unison. Eliza blinked, taken aback by their immediate certainty. "Are you sure? This isn't something to rush into?" "Mom," Alexander said gently, "we've been wondering about him our whole lives. Now we have a chance to actually know him. Of course we want to meet him. Besides," Olivia added with a hint of her usual mischief, "I want to see if he's as smart as Alex thinks he is. Maybe he can finally explain quantum entanglement in a way that doesn't make my brain hurt." Despite the gravity of the moment, Eliza laughed. "You're both sure about this?" They nodded, determination evident in their matching expressions. "All right," she said, reaching for her phone. "I'll call him. Every day without these stories is another day making decisions without the wisdom you need. Our subscribers report making better life choices after watching our content. Are you really willing to navigate life's challenges alone? Subscribe now, or share in the comments why you're resistant to growth." Daniel Blackwood's private jet touched down at Boston Logan International Airport exactly 1 week after the Westridge Gala. He had spent the intervening days in a state of emotional turmoil, canceling meetings, rearranging his schedule, and trying to process the fact that he had two 15-year-old children he had never known existed. Children with Eliza. The thought still stunned him anew each time it crossed his mind. When her call had come, "They want to meet you, this weekend, on their terms," he had agreed immediately, without consulting his calendar or his executive team. Nothing was more important than this. Now, as his driver navigated the Boston traffic toward the address Eliza had provided, Daniel found himself uncharacteristically nervous. He, who had presented to boards of directors and medical conferences without breaking a sweat, was terrified of meeting two teenagers. His children. His son and daughter. The car pulled up to a charming brownstone in a tree-lined neighborhood. Daniel checked his reflection in the window. He had deliberately dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, rather than his usual suit, wanting to appear approachable rather than intimidating. Before he could second-guess himself, he was walking up the steps and ringing the doorbell. Moments later, the door opened to reveal Eliza, looking both familiar and strange in casual weekend clothes, jeans, and a soft blue blouse that matched her eyes. "Daniel," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Come in." He stepped into a home that radiated warmth and character. Hardwood floors, walls lined with bookshelves, and everywhere, evidence of a family life well lived. Photos chronicled the twins' growth from infants to teenagers. Science fair ribbons and music competition certificates hung alongside artwork and family vacation mementos. "They're in the living room," Eliza said quietly, leading the way. Daniel followed, his heart hammering against his ribs. And then, suddenly, there they were. Two teenagers stood as he entered, a boy and a girl, both tall and slender, with Eliza's amber eyes and his own dark hair. The boy had Daniel's jawline and serious expression, while the girl had Eliza's delicate features and determined chin. They were the perfect blend of their parents, and the sight of them knocked the breath from Daniel's lungs. "Alexander, Olivia," Eliza said, her voice steady despite the tension Daniel could feel radiating from her. "This is Daniel Blackwood, your father." For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Daniel drank in the sight of them, cataloging every detail. Alexander's slightly protective stance in front of his sister, Olivia's curious tilt of the head, the identical way they both assessed him with intelligent, wary eyes. "Hello," he finally managed, his voice rougher than he intended. I'm very glad to meet you both." Alexander stepped forward first, extending his hand with formal politeness. "Dr. Blackwood, your paper on neural regeneration and spinal cord injuries was groundbreaking." Daniel shook his son's hand, momentarily stunned by the firm grip and the sophisticated comment. "You've read my research?" "Of course," Alexander replied, as if it were obvious. "I've read all your published work since I found out who you were. Your approach to cellular reprogramming is fascinating." "Thank you," Daniel said, a surge of pride washing through him. That's incredible that you understand it." "Alex understands everything," Olivia said, stepping forward with less formality but equal assessment in her gaze. "It's annoying, actually." A smile tugged at Daniel's lips. "And you, Olivia? What are your interests?" "Music, mainly, and writing." She studied him with unnerving directness. "Mom says I get my analytical mind from you, but my creativity from her." "Your mother is probably right," Daniel said, glancing at Eliza, who stood watching the interaction with guarded eyes. "She usually is." An awkward silence fell, the weight of 16 years of absence hanging between them. "Why don't we sit down?" Eliza suggested, gesturing to the comfortable seating area. "I've made coffee and tea, and there are cookies that Olivia baked yesterday." "Stress baking," Olivia explained with a small smile. "It's genetic, apparently." As they settled into the living room, Daniel found himself overwhelmed by the surreal nature of the situation. These remarkable young people were his children, strangers who shared his DNA, his intellect, his features. He had missed their entire lives, and now he was sitting in Eliza's living room making small talk as if this were a normal family gathering. "I'm sure you have questions," he said finally, looking between Alexander and Olivia. "I'll answer anything you want to know. Complete honesty." The twins exchanged a glance, another of those silent communications that Eliza had mentioned. "Why did you leave?" Alexander asked bluntly. "Mom said you chose your career over staying with her. Was that true?" Daniel winced at the directness of the question, but he had promised honesty. Yes, it was true. I was offered a scholarship that would set me on the path to everything I thought I wanted. Medical school, research opportunities, the chance to develop treatments that could help millions. But the condition was that I had to leave immediately, with no distractions. He met Alexander's gaze directly. Your mother was considered a distraction? That's a terrible reason, Olivia said, frowning. Yes, it was, Daniel agreed. It was the worst decision of my life, though I didn't realize it at the time. I thought I was being rational, choosing a future that would benefit the most people. I told myself your mother would be better off without me holding her back. But you didn't even say goodbye, Alexander pointed out. Mom said you just disappeared. Shame washed over Daniel. I was a coward, he admitted. I knew if I saw her face, heard her voice, I wouldn't be able to go through with it. So I left without a word, thinking it would be a clean break. He shook his head. I was young and stupid and terrified of failing. That's no excuse, but it's the truth. The twins absorbed this, their expressions thoughtful. If you had known about us, Olivia asked, would you have stayed? The question pierced Daniel's heart. Without hesitation, he said firmly. If I had known your mother was pregnant, nothing could have dragged me away. Not Stanford, not Dr. Wells, nothing. But you didn't try to contact her later, Alexander pressed, even after you became successful. Why? Daniel sighed. At first, it was because I was drowning in work, medical school, residency, starting my company. But as time passed, it became harder to imagine how to bridge that gap. What could I possibly say after years of silence? And then, when my company took off and I started appearing in the media, I thought she must have seen me, known where I was. The fact that she never reached out seemed to confirm that she wanted nothing to do with me. She was protecting us, Olivia said, a hint of defensiveness in her voice. Yes, she was, Daniel agreed, glancing at Eliza, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. Your mother has always put you first. She's done an amazing job raising you both. She has, Alexander agreed, his expression softening slightly. But that doesn't mean we haven't wondered about you. I understand, Daniel said quietly, and I want you to know that while I can never make up for the years I've missed, I would very much like to be part of your lives now, in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. The twins looked at each other again, having another of their silent conversations. We'd like that too, Olivia said finally, but we need time. This is all very new. Of course, Daniel nodded quickly. We can take it as slowly as you want. I'm not going anywhere this time. Alexander studied him with those penetrating gray eyes, so like his own. Promise? The simple word, laden with 15 years of absence, struck Daniel like a physical blow. I promise, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I will never disappear from your lives again. For the first time since he'd entered the house, Eliza spoke. It's almost lunchtime. I thought we might walk to that cafe on the corner, the one with the good sandwiches. If everyone's agreeable? The suggestion of a public outing, a normal family activity, felt like an olive branch. Daniel accepted it gratefully. That sounds perfect. As they prepared to leave, Daniel watched Alexander help Olivia find her missing shoe, teasing her about her perpetual disorganization. He watched Eliza grab her keys and wallet, reminding the twins to bring jackets, even though they protested it wasn't cold. He watched this family unit, complete and functional without him, and felt both profound gratitude that they were willing to make space for him and deep regret for all he had missed. But as they stepped out into the spring sunshine, Olivia falling into step beside him and hesitantly asking about his latest research, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced in 16 years. Hope. Not for forgiveness, he didn't deserve that, but for a second chance to be the father his children deserved, and perhaps, someday, the man worthy of Eliza's trust again. The cafe was a cozy neighborhood spot with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. As they settled around a corner table, Daniel noticed how the twins automatically took their usual seats, leaving him the chair that must have always remained empty at their family outings. So, Alexander said after they'd ordered, your company is working on neural pathway regeneration for spinal cord injuries. How close are you to a viable treatment for complete severing of the cord? Daniel blinked, momentarily taken aback by the sophisticated question. We're in phase 2 clinical trials now. The preliminary results are promising. We've seen partial restoration of function in 68% of participants. Using stem cell therapy combined with electrical stimulation? Alexander pressed. Yes, along with a proprietary protein matrix that helps guide the new neural connections. Daniel leaned forward, his initial nervousness forgotten as he slipped into the familiar territory of his research. The challenge has been getting the new pathways to form with sufficient specificity to restore fine motor control. Have you considered using CRISPR to modify the stem cells for targeted growth factor expression? Alexander asked, his eyes lighting up with genuine interest. Daniel felt a surge of pride and wonder. His son, his 15-year-old son, was not only following the conversation but offering insights that some of his research team hadn't considered. We've done some preliminary work in that direction, he admitted. But there are regulatory hurdles with genetic modification that make the approval process more complex. But the potential benefits would outweigh the regulatory delays if it significantly improved outcomes, Alexander argued. Olivia rolled her eyes. And this is why I avoid sitting next to Alex at dinner parties. Once he starts talking science, it's impossible to get a word in edgewise. Daniel laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even him. What about you, Olivia? Your mother mentioned you're musical. I play piano, violin, and guitar, she said, with a casual shrug that didn't quite hide her pride. And I write songs. Nothing professional or anything. She's being modest, Eliza interjected, her expression softening as she looked at her daughter. Olivia won the New England Young Composers Competition last year. Her piece was performed by the Boston Symphony Orchestra. That's incredible, Daniel said, genuinely impressed. I'd love to hear your music sometime. Olivia studied him for a moment, as if weighing his sincerity. Maybe. I'm working on something new right now. It's complicated. Like its composer, Alexander teased, nudging his sister. The conversation flowed more easily after that, moving from the twins' interests to their school, their friends, their plans for college. Daniel listened intently, trying to absorb 16 years of history in a single lunch, aware that he was only scratching the surface of who these remarkable young people were. Throughout the meal, he couldn't help stealing glances at Eliza, who remained mostly quiet, observing the interaction with guarded eyes. She had done this, raised these brilliant, confident, kind children on her own. The magnitude of what she had accomplished and what he had missed left him humbled. As they walked back to the house, Alexander fell into step beside Daniel, continuing their discussion about medical research while Olivia and Eliza walked ahead, their heads bent together in quiet conversation. Mom's worried, Alexander said suddenly, lowering his voice. She thinks you might disappear again once the novelty wears off. Daniel stopped walking, forcing Alexander to stop as well. That won't happen, he said firmly. I know my word doesn't mean much to you yet, but I promise you, Alexander, I'm here for good, for as long as you and Olivia want me in your lives. Alexander studied him with those penetrating gray eyes, so like his own. I want to believe that. Then give me the chance to prove it, Daniel said simply. That's all I ask. Alexander nodded slowly. Fair enough. But just so you know, if you hurt Mom again, or Olivia, you'll have me to deal with. Despite the seriousness of the moment, Daniel felt a surge of pride at his son's protectiveness. I would expect nothing less. When they returned to the house, the afternoon stretched into early evening. Daniel found himself reluctant to leave, savoring every moment with the children he was just beginning to know. But eventually, he knew it was time to go. I should head back to my hotel, he said, rising from the couch where they'd been looking through photo albums, Eliza's concession to his desire to glimpse the years he'd missed. Will we see you again before you go back to Seattle? Olivia asked, a hint of vulnerability in her voice that made Daniel's heart ache. Absolutely, he assured her. I've cleared my schedule for the next week. I'm here for as long as you want me to be. Maybe we could have dinner tomorrow, Alexander suggested, glancing at his mother for approval. There's this Italian place we like. That sounds wonderful, Daniel said, looking to Eliza for confirmation. She nodded, her expression unreadable. I'll make a reservation. At the door, Daniel hesitated, unsure of the appropriate goodbye. Handshakes seemed too formal after the emotional day they'd shared, but he didn't want to presume more intimacy than they were comfortable with. Olivia solved the dilemma by stepping forward and giving him a quick, awkward hug. See you tomorrow, she said, then disappeared up the stairs before he could respond. Alexander offered his hand, which Daniel shook, feeling the strength in his son's grip. I'll email you those articles on CRISPR applications we discussed. I look forward to reading them, Daniel said, meaning it. Then it was just Eliza, standing in the doorway, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. Thank you, Daniel said quietly, for today, for raising them, for everything. They're good kids, she replied. They deserve to know you. And you? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Do you think there's any chance we could— Don't, Eliza interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. This is about Alexander and Olivia, not us. Whatever was between us ended 16 years ago. Daniel nodded, accepting her boundary, even as hope flickered stubbornly in his chest. Of course. I'll see you tomorrow. Then. As his car pulled away from the curb, Daniel looked back at the house. Warm light spilling from its windows, a home filled with love and memories he hadn't been part of. For the first time in his life, his penthouse in Seattle, with its minimalist design and spectacular views, felt hollow and meaningless in comparison. Imagine missing the resolution to this powerful story, just like Daniel almost missed his children's entire lives. Don't let fear of commitment keep you from transformation. The subscribe button is your gateway to healing. Still not convinced? Tell us in the comments what emotional walls you're hiding behind. The following weeks established a new rhythm in all their lives. Daniel extended his stay in Boston indefinitely, taking a suite at a hotel near Eliza's home and working remotely when necessary. He attended Alexander's science competition, sitting beside Eliza in the audience and feeling his chest might burst with pride when his son took first place. He listened to Olivia practice a new composition, amazed by the depth of emotion she could convey through music. Small moments became precious treasures, helping Alexander with a complex physics problem, teaching Olivia to play chess, joining them for family movie nights where he learned their inside jokes and favorite films. Each day brought new discoveries, new connections, and the gradual easing of the twins' initial wariness. With Eliza, things remained more complicated. She was unfailingly polite, even warm at times, but maintained a careful distance. Daniel respected her boundaries, never pushing for more than she was willing to give, though his feelings for her had only deepened since their reunion. One evening, after the twins had gone upstairs to finish homework, Daniel lingered in Eliza's kitchen, helping her clean up after dinner. I've been thinking, he said carefully, handing her a plate to dry. It doesn't make sense for me to keep paying for a hotel when I'm spending most of my time here in Boston. I'm looking at apartments in the neighborhood. Eliza's hands stilled on the dish towel. You're moving to Boston permanently? If that's all right with you, Daniel said. I want to be close to Alexander and Olivia, and my company can be run from anywhere. I've been doing it remotely for weeks now without any issues. What about your life in Seattle? Your friends? Your home? Daniel gave a rueful smile. I don't have many friends, Eliza. Colleagues, yes. Business associates, but not people I'd miss. And as for my home, it's just a place. It never felt like this. He gestured around them, at the kitchen with its mismatched mugs and children's artwork magnetized to the refrigerator. It never felt real. Eliza studied him for a long moment. You're serious about this? Completely. I've already spoken with my executive team. They understand this is non-negotiable. And the twins? Have you discussed this with them? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first, make sure you were comfortable with the idea. Eliza sighed, setting down the dish towel. Daniel, I can't stop you from moving to Boston, and I won't pretend it wouldn't be good for Alexander and Olivia to have you nearby. But I need you to understand something. She met his gaze directly. If you do this, if you become a regular part of their lives, you can't change your mind. You can't decide in 6 months or a year that you miss your old life and disappear again. They're starting to trust you, to care about you. I won't let them be hurt that way. I understand, Daniel said solemnly. And I promise you, Eliza, nothing is more important to me than being their father. Not my company, not my research, nothing. I've already missed 15 years. I won't miss another day if I can help it. Something in his voice must have convinced her, because she nodded slowly. All right. But let's take this one step at a time. Find an apartment, see how it goes. The twins will be thrilled. And they were. When Daniel announced at breakfast the next morning that he was looking for an apartment in Boston, Olivia's face lit up with a smile that made his heart swell. Really? You're staying? She asked, as if afraid to believe it. Really, Daniel confirmed. I thought maybe you two could help me find a place. You know the neighborhood better than I do. There's a building 3 blocks from here with vacancies, Alexander said immediately. Walking distance, but not too close. Optimal proximity. Daniel laughed at his son's practical assessment. Sounds perfect. Want to check it out this weekend? The apartment hunt became a family project, with the twins debating the merits of various locations and features with surprising passion. Eliza remained more reserved, but Daniel caught her smiling at their enthusiasm more than once. They eventually settled on a spacious 3-bedroom unit in the building Alexander had suggested, close enough for impromptu visits but far enough to give everyone their space. Daniel furnished it simply but comfortably, making sure to include a piano for Olivia and converting one bedroom into a study where Alexander could work on his science projects. It needs something, Olivia declared on the day they helped Daniel move in. She disappeared, returning an hour later with a framed photograph of herself and Alexander from a recent hiking trip. For your desk, she said, handing it to him with studied casualness. So you don't forget what we look like. Daniel took the photo, his throat tight with emotion. As if I could ever forget, he said softly. As spring turned to summer, Daniel became an integral part of the twins' lives. He attended Olivia's music recitals, sitting beside Eliza in the audience and blinking back tears at the beauty of his daughter's playing. He spent hours in the makeshift lab he'd helped Alexander set up, discussing scientific theories and experimental designs. He learned their routines, their preferences, their quirks, all the details that made them uniquely themselves. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted between him and Eliza as well. The wariness in her eyes when she looked at him began to fade, replaced by something warmer, more complex. They developed their own rhythm as co-parents, consulting each other about the twins' activities and needs, presenting a united front when necessary. One evening, after the twins had gone to bed, Daniel and Eliza sat on her back porch, sharing a bottle of wine and the comfortable silence of old friends. Thank you, Daniel said suddenly. For what? For letting me into their lives. For raising them to be the incredible people they are. For not hating me, even though you have every right to. Eliza was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in her glass. I tried to hate you, she admitted. For years. It was easier than missing you. The simple confession hung between them, heavy with implication. I never stopped missing you, Daniel said softly. Even when I pretended I had moved on. Even when I told myself I had made the right choice. There was always this Eliza-shaped hole in my life that nothing else could fill. She looked at him then. Really looked at him, as if seeing past the successful CEO to the boy she had once loved. We can't go back, Daniel. Too much has happened. We're different people now. I know, he acknowledged. But maybe we could go forward? Get to know who we are now? Eliza didn't answer immediately, and Daniel held his breath, afraid he had pushed too far, too fast. But then she smiled, a small, cautious smile that nonetheless kindled hope in his chest. Maybe, she said, one day at a time. It was enough. More than he deserved, certainly. Daniel reached across the space between them and gently took her hand. When she didn't pull away, he felt something long broken inside him begin to heal. Summer brought new opportunities for family bonding. Daniel suggested a vacation, their first as a family. And after some discussion, they settled on a week at a lakeside cabin in Vermont. Away from the distractions of work and school, they hiked forest trails, swam in the clear lake waters, and spent evenings around a campfire, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows. On their third night, as Eliza and Olivia prepared dinner in the cabin's kitchen, Daniel and Alexander sat on the dock, fishing poles in hand, though neither seemed particularly concerned about catching anything. "Can I ask you something?" Alexander said, his eyes on the still water. "Anything," Daniel replied. "Do you regret it? Leaving Mom? Missing our childhood?" Daniel considered the question carefully, knowing his son deserved complete honesty. "Every day," he finally said. "It's the greatest regret of my life. If I could go back and make a different choice, I would do it in a heartbeat." Alexander nodded, absorbing this. "But then you might not have founded your company. You might not have developed treatments that have helped thousands of people." "That's true," Daniel acknowledged, "and I'm proud of that work. But Alexander, what I've come to realize is that success means nothing if you don't have people to share it with. All those breakthroughs, all those accolades, they felt hollow because I was alone." "You're not alone now," Alexander said quietly. Daniel looked at his son, this remarkable young man with his serious eyes and brilliant mind, and felt a wave of love so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. "No," he agreed. "I'm not alone now." Later that night, after the twins had gone to bed, Daniel and Eliza sat on the cabin's porch, listening to the chorus of frogs and crickets from the nearby lake. "Alexander asked me if I regretted leaving," Daniel said, breaking the comfortable silence. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That it's my greatest regret." He turned to look at her, illuminated by the soft porch light. "But Eliza, I can't regret where we are now. These past months with you and the twins, they've been the happiest of my life." Eliza was quiet for a long moment. "They've been good months," she finally admitted. "Better than I expected." "For me too." Daniel hesitated, then asked the question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Do you think... Is there any chance that you and I..." "Daniel," Eliza interrupted gently, "we're doing well as co-parents. The twins are adjusting to having you in their lives. Let's not complicate things." "Is that what it would be? A complication?" Daniel asked, his voice soft in the darkness. Eliza sighed, looking out at the moonlight reflecting off the lake. "I don't know. I just know that I spent 16 years building a life without you. Learning to trust my own judgment again. Becoming someone who doesn't need anyone else to feel complete." She turned to face him. "I'm not the same girl you left behind, Daniel. I know that," he said. "And I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking if there might be room in your life, in your heart, for the man I am now. Not the boy who hurt you, but the man who would do anything to make you happy." "I don't know," Eliza admitted, and the honesty in her voice gave Daniel more hope than a false reassurance would have. "But I'm willing to find out. Slowly." Daniel nodded, accepting her terms. "Slowly," he agreed. "We have time." As summer faded into autumn, their family settled into new routines. Daniel became a fixture at the twins' school events, proudly watching Alexander compete in science fairs and Olivia perform in concerts. He hosted weekly dinners at his apartment, learning to cook with Olivia's patient guidance. He and Alexander spent Saturdays visiting university research labs, exploring potential college options. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, his relationship with Eliza evolved as well. Coffee, after dropping the twins at school, became a regular occurrence. Texts about parenting matters expanded to include personal updates and inside jokes. Movie nights with the twins occasionally extended to dinner for two after the teenagers went out with friends. They were careful, both of them, mindful of the fragile trust being rebuilt between them and wary of disrupting the delicate balance they'd established as a family. But the spark that had drawn them together as teenagers hadn't died. It had merely been banked, waiting for the right moment to flare back to life. That moment came on a crisp October evening, as they walked home from a parent-teacher conference, the twins having gone ahead to meet friends for pizza. "Alexander's physics teacher thinks he should apply early decision to MIT," Eliza said, her breath visible in the cool air. Says he's the most promising student Alexander's physics teacher thinks he should apply early decision to MIT, Eliza said, her breath visible in the cool air. Says he's the most promising student she's seen in 20 years of teaching. I'm not surprised, Daniel replied, his chest swelling with pride. His understanding of theoretical concepts is extraordinary. And did you hear what Olivia's music instructor said? That her latest composition shows remarkable emotional maturity? They're amazing kids, Eliza agreed, smiling up at him. We did good. Well, you did good, she corrected herself. I just got a watch. No, Daniel said firmly, stopping to face her under a streetlight. You did it all, Eliza. You raised them to be the incredible people they are. I'm just grateful you've let me be part of their lives now. Eliza studied his face, her amber eyes reflecting the golden glow of the streetlight. You know, when you first came back, I was so afraid. Afraid of what? That you'd disappoint them, that you'd make promises you couldn't keep, that they'd end up hurt the way I was. She shook her head slightly. But you've proven me wrong, Daniel. You've been everything they needed, consistent, supportive, present. I told you I wouldn't let them down, he said quietly. I meant it. I know that now. Eliza took a step closer, close enough that he could smell the familiar scent of her perfume. And I think I'm ready to trust you again. Not just with the twins, but with me. Daniel's heart thundered in his chest. Eliza, he breathed, hardly daring to hope. She reached up, her hand cool against his cheek. 16 years is a long time to miss someone, she whispered, and then she was kissing him, her lips soft and familiar and new all at once. Daniel pulled her close, pouring 16 years of regret and longing and hope into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said simply. I never stopped loving you. I know, Eliza replied, a smile in her voice. It just took me a while to admit that I never stopped loving you either. They walked home hand in hand, like teenagers again, but with the wisdom and perspective that only time and experience could bring. At her door, Daniel kissed her once more, gently, reverently. Dinner tomorrow? He asked. Just the two of us? Eliza nodded, her eyes bright with promise. It's a date. When the twins returned home later that evening, they found their mother humming in the kitchen, a soft smile on her face as she prepared tea. Good conference? Alexander asked, dropping his backpack on a chair. Very good, Eliza replied, her cheeks flushing slightly. Olivia studied her mother with narrowed eyes, then broke into a knowing grin. Finally, she declared, helping herself to a cookie from the jar on the counter. What do you mean, finally? Eliza asked, trying and failing to look innocent. Mom, please, Olivia rolled her eyes. We've been watching you and Dad dance around each other for months. It was getting painful. Dad? Eliza repeated, raising an eyebrow. It was the first time either twin had referred to Daniel that way. Well, that's what he is, isn't he? Alexander said, matter-of-factly, though his casual tone couldn't quite hide the emotion beneath. And now, apparently, he's also your boyfriend? Partner? What's the appropriate term for your parent's significant other when they're also your other parent? Eliza laughed, the sound light and carefree in a way it hadn't been in years. I think Dad covers it just fine. The twins exchanged one of their silent communications. Then nodded in unison. We approve, Olivia announced grandly. Just so you know. Well, thank goodness for that, Eliza said dryly, but her eyes were soft with love as she looked at her children, their children. As autumn deepened into winter, the Blackwood Morgan family, as they had taken to calling themselves, grew closer still. Daniel's apartment became a secondary home for the twins, with designated bedrooms and personal belongings gradually migrating between the two residences. Family dinners alternated between Eliza's warm, lived-in home and Daniel's more modern space, which was slowly acquiring the comfortable clutter that signified regular teenage occupation. Christmas approached, bringing with it the twins' 16th birthday. Daniel, determined to make their first celebration together special, consulted with Eliza about appropriate gifts. Alexander has been talking about this advanced microscope, he said one evening as they prepared dinner together, moving around Eliza's kitchen with the easy familiarity of longtime partners. But it's expensive, and I don't want to overstep. Eliza smiled, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. Daniel, you're their father. You're allowed to spoil them a little. And Olivia, she mentioned wanting to record some of her compositions, but I'm not sure what equipment she needs. A professional-grade microphone and mixing software would thrill her, Eliza suggested, but the best gift you could give them is what you've already been giving. Your time, your attention, your love. Daniel set down the spoon he'd been using to stir the sauce and wrapped his arms around Eliza from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured against her hair. "To get a second chance with all of you?" Eliza leaned back into his embrace. "I ask myself the same thing sometimes. If I hadn't gone to that gala, if you hadn't told me about the twins, if they hadn't wanted to meet you." Daniel turned her in his arms to face him. So many ifs. But here we are. "Here we are," Eliza agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. The sound of the front door opening and teenage voices arguing good-naturedly broke the moment. Daniel stepped back, returning to the sauce with a smile as the twins burst into the kitchen, bringing with them the cold air of December and the boundless energy of youth. "Dad, tell Olivia she's wrong," Alexander demanded without preamble. The quantum multiverse theory absolutely could allow for parallel timelines where different choices create divergent realities. "Don't drag Dad into this," Olivia protested. "Just because you can't admit that your sci-fi obsession is clouding your scientific judgment." "Children," Eliza interrupted, her tone stern but her eyes dancing with amusement. "Wash up for dinner before you debate the nature of reality, please." As the twins disappeared, still bickering, Daniel caught Eliza's eye across the kitchen, and they shared a smile of perfect understanding. This chaotic, loving, imperfect family was everything he had never known he wanted. Everything he had almost lost forever. The twins' birthday fell on a snowy Saturday in January. They awoke to find both their homes, Eliza's house and Daniel's apartment, connected by a scavenger hunt that led them through memories of their childhood and clues about their gifts. The final destination was Daniel's apartment, where he and Eliza waited with cake, presents, and decorations that transformed the once sterile space into a celebration of family. "Before you open your gifts," Daniel said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous, "there's something I want to ask you both." He glanced at Eliza, who nodded encouragingly. "I've been thinking about making a more permanent change to our living situation." The twins exchanged glances. "Are you moving back to Seattle?" Alexander asked, his brow furrowing with concern. No, Daniel assured him quickly. "Just the opposite, actually. I'm thinking of selling my Seattle penthouse entirely, making Boston my permanent home." "That's great, Dad," Olivia said, relief evident in her voice. "But we already knew you were staying." "There's more," Daniel continued. He took a deep breath, then reached for Eliza's hand. "I've asked your mother to marry me." The twins' eyes widened in perfect synchronization. "And I've said yes," Eliza added, a smile blooming across her face. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then Olivia launched herself at both of them, wrapping her arms around their necks in an exuberant hug. "Finally," she exclaimed, "this is the best birthday present ever." Alexander approached more sedately, but his smile was just as bright. "Statistically speaking, this was the most probable outcome given the variables," he said, his scientific tone belied by the emotion in his eyes. "But it's still really great." "We wanted to make sure you were both okay with this," Eliza said, reaching out to include Alexander in the family embrace. "It would mean changes for all of us." "Good changes," Daniel added. "But we're a family now, all four of us. Every decision affects everyone." "Are you kidding?" Olivia laughed through happy tears. "We've been waiting for this since you first showed up, Dad. Haven't we, Alex?" Alexander nodded, his usual reserve softening. "It's the logical conclusion to our family narrative arc." Daniel laughed, his heart so full it felt it might burst. "Well, in that case," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket and dropping to one knee before Eliza, "let me do this properly." Eliza's eyes widened, Daniel, you already proposed last night. That was the practice round, he said with a wink to the twins. This is the official version, with our whole family present. He opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald ring, the same deep green as the dress she'd worn the night they reunited. Eliza Morgan, 16 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life by walking away from you. I've spent every day since then becoming someone worthy of a second chance, someone worthy of your love. Will you marry me, make our family complete, and let me spend the rest of my life showing you how much I love you? Tears spilled down Eliza's cheeks as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Daniel, I will. As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, the twins applauded and cheered. Daniel pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against Eliza's, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them to this moment. I love you, he murmured. All of you, my family. We love you too, Dad, Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. Even when you're scientifically incorrect, Alexander added with a teasing smile. Especially then, Eliza laughed, pulling her children, their children, into the embrace. Standing in the circle of his family's arms, Daniel Blackwood finally understood what true success meant. Not the billions in his bank account or the medical breakthroughs that bore his name, but this: love, forgiveness, second chances. The family he had almost lost, now found again. If this story of love, loss, and redemption touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Sterling's Secrets of Love. Remember, it's never too late to choose what truly matters in life. What would you do if you were in Daniel's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Every relationship faces crossroads where choices must be made between personal ambition and love. Daniel chose ambition and spent 16 years regretting it. Don't make the same mistake. Subscribe now to ensure you never miss another life-changing story that could save your relationships and show you what truly matters. If you're still hesitating to hit that subscribe button, ask yourself, what opportunities for love and connection are you letting slip away right now? The wedding took place the following spring, a small, intimate ceremony in the garden of Westridge Academy, where it had all begun. Alexander stood proudly as his father's best man, while Olivia played a composition she had written especially for the occasion, bringing tears to every eye. As Daniel and Eliza exchanged vows beneath an arch of spring flowers, with their children beside them and their future stretching bright before them, Daniel reflected on the long, winding path that had led them here. The scholarship boy who had once believed success meant sacrificing love had finally learned the truth. That no achievement was meaningful without family to share it with. That no amount of money could purchase the joy of watching his children grow. That no medical breakthrough could heal the heart as completely as forgiveness and love. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel kissed Eliza with all the love and gratitude in his heart. For her strength in raising their children alone, for her courage in giving him a second chance, for her willingness to build a new future together. I love you, he whispered against her lips. Forever this time. Forever, she agreed, her amber eyes shining with happiness. No more missed chances. As they turned to face their guests, hand in hand, Daniel caught sight of Alexander and Olivia, watching them with matching smiles. His children, their children, the greatest gift he had never known he had. The scholarship boy from the wrong side of the tracks had finally found his way home. Not to wealth or acclaim or professional success, but to the only thing that had ever truly mattered. Family. The family he had almost lost. The family he would cherish every day for the rest of his life. And as they walked together down the aisle, Daniel and Eliza, Alexander and Olivia, the Blackwood family was finally beautifully complete.